Hello, Math 8s. Here we go. We're going to start rolling with some problems today. And so we're into the world of percent problems. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to solve them using proportions. So you can see proportions is the big idea today. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and make sense of how to do these problems with proportions. So the first one, kind of not really a word problem. You're going to get some word problems, but it's just basically what's 150% of 60? What does that equal? And our hope is that we can figure out what that box is. What is that number? 150% of 60. Now I want to just get you thinking about one thing before we start with this question. So I'm going to build my little thought bubble over here, and I want you to think, what is 100% of 60? And remember, 100% is like a whole. And if 100% of 60, if you remember that that's just equal to 60, it's equal to the whole amount, which is 60. So 150% then must be bigger than 60. And if you can kind of keep track of that in your brain, then when you go to think, is my answer reasonable? You should have a pretty good understanding of whether we're on the right track. So how do we do this with proportions? Well, first thing you need to know is, what is a proportion? A proportion is just a fraction separated by an equal sign to another fraction. So we've got a fraction on each side of the equal sign. Okay, and they're relating something back and forth. So in this case, what do we put on this side of the equal sign? Well, it all comes back to our percentage. 150%, we know that percent means out of 100. So we're going to do 150 and then out of 100. So we'll write that as a fraction. Now, here's the tricky part. I look at this 60 and I ask, where does it go? Well, if you think back to our thought bubble over here, 100% of 60 is just 60. So 60 is our full amount. That's like 100%. 150% would be even more than 60. So we want to leave that blank. So we can actually put that little box with the red color in the top. Now, if you don't like putting a box with a red color in it, you could use an X or a Y or an A or some other symbol that you choose. I'm just going to use a box with red coloring in it. So the question ends up being, what is the value of that box? So over here, we've got 150 over 100. What number over 60 is equal to 150 over 100? And so this is what we're trying to figure out. Well, how do we go about doing this? Well, a couple different ways. Okay, I'm going to show you one method right here. The first thing I would do is I'd look at the 150 over 100 and I'd punch it into my calculator. Reminder, the fraction side is division. So 150 divided by 100 is actually equal to 1.5. And on this side, we've got our box over 60. Now the next thing is, when we're doing algebra, we're always thinking of doing opposites. So what's happening to our letter, or in this case the box? It's being divided by 60. So to get the box by itself, I need to do the opposite. So instead of dividing by 60, the inverse relation is multiply by 60. That cancels with that. That cancels with that. Or that multiplies to that. So 1.5 times 60, and if you're not sure what that is off the top of your head, feel free, punch it into your calculator. But 1 times 60 is 60. Half of 60 is 30. That just ends up equaling 90. So what does the box equal? 90. So what's 150% of 60? The answer is 90. So that's one way, using a proportion to solve the answer here. Let's go try this again, but it's a little bit different. Okay, so in this case, 325% of some number is equal to 78. And the question is, what is the number that this works out for? Well, let's do this again with a proportion. So remember, we put the equal sign, we've got a fraction on one side, one fraction on the other, and we have to know how numbers relate to each other. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the 325%. So remember, that's 325 out of, percent means out of 100. Now here's always the tricky part. This box here is our 100% value. We don't know what it is here. So what we've got here is we've got an unknown, and it's found on the bottom. Okay, because it goes across from the 100%. The answer to this is actually 78. So 325% of some number gives us 78. So the 325% amount is 78 here. One thing that I do not like in this question is my variable, this box, is in the bottom. I do not like that. So let me show you just a quick mathematical move that's really powerful. Is you can take the reciprocal of one side of the equal sign. And reciprocal means you just flip it. So you're going to learn more about that later. But we're going to just flip it. So the box will go on top and the 78 will go on the bottom. Now here's the rule in math. If you do something to one side of the equal sign, to keep your equation balanced, you have to do it to the other. So if we flip this side as well, we get 100 over 325. First thing that I would do here is I would actually take your calculator and do this division. It's just a number divided by a number. That's what a fraction stands for. So let's just quick do it. We're going to do 100 divided by 325. And when I do that, I get a decimal, and it's 0.307. And this equals some number divided by 78. Now our goal, just a reminder, when we do algebra, is to get that box by itself. So how do we get the box by itself? Well, it's being divided by 78. We do the inverse operation, which is multiply by 78. Again, in algebra, what you do to one side, you do to the other. So we have to multiply the 307 thousandths by 78 as well. We can go back to our calculator here, and what we're going to do is we're going to multiply 0.307 by 78, and you end up getting a value here of something very close to, or if not exact, depending on how many decimals you had, of 24. So the answer to this question is actually 24. So if you took 325% of 24, that would give us an answer of 78. Well, I hope this gets you going, grade 8s. Good luck.